This is by a man named Kent Nurburn, just to give credit where credit is due. 20 years ago, I drove a cab for a living. One time I arrived in the middle of the night to pick at a building to pick someone up that was dark except for one single light on the ground floor window. So I walked to the door and knocked. Just a minute, I heard from a frail, elderly voice. I could hear something being dragged across the floor, and after a long pause, the door opened, and I saw a woman in her 80s standing before me, wearing a print dress and a little pillbox hat with a veil pinned on it. She looked like something out of a 1940s movie. And by her side was a small nylon suitcase. Well, the apartment actually looked as if no one had lived in it for years. The furniture was all covered with sheets. There were no clocks on the walls, no knickknacks or utensils. Everything was in a cardboard box piled over in the corner. She said to me, "Would you mind to carry my bag out to the car?" So I took the suitcase to the cab. Then I returned to assist the woman. She took my arm and we walked slowly toward the curb. And she kept thanking me over and over for my kindness. "It's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way I would want my mother to be treated." "Oh, you're such a good boy," she said. When we got in the cab, she gave me an address and then said, "Would you mind to drive through downtown?" "Well, I don't mind," I said. "I'm not in a big hurry, but it is not the shortest way," indicating to her it was going to cost her more money if she went the long way. And she said, "Oh, I don't mind. I'm on my way to a hospice." I looked in the rearview mirror and her eyes had tears in them. "You see, I don't have any family left, and the doctor says I don't have very long to live." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. That was the first act of love, wasn't it? This is not somebody I need to make money off of. This is somebody I need to help. "What route would you like me to take?" I asked. For the next 2 hours, we drove around the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she'd ask me to slow down in front of a particular building or a corner and would just sit there and stare at the building and say absolutely nothing. The sun was coming up and she suddenly said, "Well, I'm tired, we better go now." I drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building that looked like a small convalescent home. They must have been expecting her because 2 men came out ready to help her get into the building. "How much do I owe you?" she asked and reached into her purse. I said, "Nothing." She said, "Well, no, you have to make a living." And he said, "There are other passengers that I can make a living off of." Almost without thinking, I bent over and gave her a hug, and she held onto me so tightly. She said, "You gave an old woman a little moment of joy. Thank you." I squeezed her hand, walked into the dim morning light. I didn't go back to work that day. I just drove aimlessly around, lost in thought, for the rest of the day. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver, or one who was impatient to end his shift? What if I'd refused to take the run, or I'd only honked once and then driven away? And this is the part I love. On a quick review, I don't think that I've ever done anything more important in my life than that one single act. We're conditioned to think that our lives revolve around great moments, but great moments often catch us unaware, beautifully wrapped in what others might consider a small one. Yeah. Amen. Every time I teach on love, every time I restudy on love, it builds me up and reminds me that this really is one of the most important things that we can possibly do in our lives. And it's not always in big things. Many times it is in small little things, like smiling at somebody or saying hello. And you know what? People are hurting in the world. And they're hurting a lot worse than you think you are. There's always somebody, no matter how bad we're hurting or no matter how bad we've got it, there's always somebody that's got it worse than we do and somebody that's hurting worse than we do. And just for the sake of God, we need to get out in the world and act like Jesus. How would Jesus treat these people as he came into contact with them. You know, we always talk about following in Jesus' steps. Well, sometimes we need to study his stops, because Jesus always stopped for hurting people.